All right. Looks like it is slowing down a little bit, so we can go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all who are joining us for this mini webinar this afternoon. Over the next 30 minutes, Renee and I are excited to talk to you about smart salting for residents in the DMV region. We're going to talk about how winter salt is impacting our environment, why it's a growing regional concern, some simple steps you can take to apply just the right amount of salt to maintain safety in the winter. And at the end of this webinar today, two attendees will also have the chance to win a very snazzy snow scraper. And if you've been watching the weather for the next weekend and coming weeks, this will be a great tool to have. So with that, we are going to go ahead and get started. I do want to mention that this is one of two mini webinars that we'll be holding this week. We will also be having a second webinar this coming Friday. This session is tailored for HOAs and other community association residents, board members, community managers, etc. So a different set of speakers, a little bit more tailored topics. But those attendees will also have a chance to win a snow scraper and hear some really insightful information. And lastly, before we get going, these do act to serve right before the full winter salt week, which runs from January 26th to 30th. So if you're interested to learn more about any of the topics that we are speaking about today or Friday, this week is jam-packed with different events, social media posting, all that you want to learn about winter salt. And you can learn more at wintersaltweek.org. So before we get going here, I am going to pull up a poll because we want to hear from everybody what your winter salt practices are. If you're the one applying salt on your property, if it's your partner, if you don't apply salt at all, maybe it's somebody on your property, etc. So we're going to let folks go ahead and do that. We'll give it another minute, but as we are starting to get some feedback in there, I do want to quickly introduce ourselves. So my name is Rebecca Murphy. I'm the Coastal Program Manager at the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, where I work to advance coastal resources management for the region. Prior to NVRC, I had the pleasure of leading local and regional watershed management and community engagement efforts in Maryland and the Carolinas. And I'm really excited to be joined by Renee Barassa today, who is the Director of Communications and Education at the Interstate Commission for the Potomac River Basin, or ICPRB. She has worked with both the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality as well as Maryland Department of the Environment on their winter salt management plans. She lives with her husband and two boys in Frederick, Maryland, where she also works with the city to reduce their winter salt use as a member of the city's Sustainability Committee. So looks like we have over 50 responses for the poll. We'll give it maybe 2 more seconds. Awesome. Okay. Let's go ahead and Renee, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see those results there? Awesome. So it looks like the majority either yes, apply salt or another member of their household does. Appreciate those that never apply salt or some of the other, which we'll have to look at other after the webinar as well. But this is really helpful for us to understand the audience that we have, and hopefully this will help kind of shape how you apply salt in the future. And with that, um, getting right into it, why should we even care about winter salt? If you live in the DMV region, you know that winter salt is necessary for all the roads, sidewalks, driveways, other surfaces that we need to continue to function daily in the wintertime, both before, during, and after winter storm events. We need to make sure that we don't have any icy surfaces so that our businesses can continue running, so that the significant number of emergency services, those vehicles, hospitals, et cetera, can continue functioning, and other operations like maybe your kids' school buses can continue to run smoothly so that all of these operations can stay open. But with that being said, as much as we need winter salt during the winter time, we do know that 1 tablespoon permanently pollutes 5 gallons of water. So when we're talking about winter salt, we want to understand the balance between those everyday functions that we need within the region and beyond, but also the impacts that we're seeing on a number of different components to our daily lives as well. So one of the first topics that we typically discuss in terms of winter salt impacts is the environment. A lot of people think that right after it snows, all of that salt just disappears and we never have to worry about it again. But the reality is that salt doesn't just disappear after winter storms. Like other forms of stormwater pollution, like nutrients from fertilizer or bacteria from dog waste, when that runs off with all that salty slush after a winter storm event, it runs directly into our storm drains and then into our local creeks, streams, lakes, rivers, and then eventually the Chesapeake Bay. And so what does this mean for those different waterways? Well, those water bodies like creeks and streams are typically freshwater. And so those species, fish, frogs, other animals that live within those water bodies typically aren't able to handle significant increases in winter salt, especially during the winter months. And so this can cause stress to those ecosystems and causing long-term disruption and also biodiversity loss. We also see this with the plants that exist within those water bodies. And so it's something that we have to take into consideration, particularly during the winter months, but we know that these effects are happening all year round due to winter salt applications. Another thing to note here is that we do find that it isn't just affecting surface water. So we're also seeing winter salt impacts within our groundwater. And what that means is impacts as well to our drinking water and then other water sources that we rely on within the region. And so the graphic to the right-hand side here pretty clearly shows the direction of it flowing. So again, we need to think about how it is directly going into these water bodies. And we'll talk about drinking water in a second as well. I want to have kind of an honorable mention here to all of the trees, shrubs, and other vegetation, not just, again, within these water bodies, but probably around your home or around your community. Most of the plants that we have within our community are not salt tolerant, although there are some native species that we can consider to avoid this. But you can see with the image on the right-hand side here, these shrubs clearly aren't able to handle or tolerate winter salt, which is where you kind of get the dying off, where you can see where the spray from the salt has impacted the leaves there. So we know how expensive it is to have landscaping on your property, within your community, et cetera. And it's really not fun to have to look at that both during the winter months and afterwards, because it can cause long-term damage to those plants. I also want to give special consideration to anybody that has pets out there. If you're seeing this within your shrubs, it is also probably affecting your pet's paws. So we know that winter salt can have a burning effect on those paws. It can also cause itchiness and dryness. So while we love to see those little booties that our pets can sometimes wear, if you don't use those in the winter months and you have winter salt on your driveway, on your sidewalk, it really isn't great for your pet's feet. And as I mentioned, with groundwater, we're also thinking about the drinking water impacts from winter salt. Since the 1930s, winter salt applications have increased not just within the DMV, but throughout the DC metropolitan region and beyond. So, thinking about our drinking water sources, including the Potomac River, as well as the Occoquan Reservoir within Northern Virginia, we're seeing increasing sodium levels at these intakes, as you can see on the graph to the right-hand side there. And that means a couple of things in terms of what we're doing with that drinking water. So first, we know that it's very difficult and expensive to treat and remove salt from water. I think a lot of people consider if the salt gets into the water, the treatment facility will just remove it and end of story. The reality is that our treatment facilities aren't currently equipped to be able to remove water, so that salt remains within our drinking water and the water that we receive. So it would have a very high price tag in the future if the salt got to the threshold where we would need to actively address this and have a treatment consideration. So what does that mean for us as those customers and those that drink the water? Well, first, there's the health considerations. So we know that those with high blood pressure, other certain medical conditions need to have low sodium diets. So one glass of water probably will not have a significant impact, but if you're drinking that water routinely over time, it does have an impact for that diet. We also just don't want to have taste complaints. You know how it feels to go to another city and taste the water and immediately have a gross reaction to it because it has different components to it that we're not used to. So we don't want individuals coming to our region and tasting that salty water because we want it to taste as fresh as possible. So drinking water is something that we look closely at within the DMV region, again, particularly within the Potomac River and the Occoquan, and closely tracking those chloride levels so that we don't have to get to the point of needing to actively treat it. One other consideration that I want to mention is also infrastructure. So we know that it's damaging to the environment, to our vegetation, to our pets' paws. But a lot of individuals also don't know that it's harmful to our bridges, sidewalks, roads, etc. Asphalt is not meant to have salt routinely placed upon it, and it causes long-term deterioration. We also know that it has impacts on our vehicles. If anybody has ever driven accidentally through brackish water or salty water, you probably very clearly remember the bill that you got from your auto shop in order to repair certain parts of your car. Salty water or salty slush has a really high price tag, and AAA estimates that the average repair cost for corrosion or rust caused by salt is about $500, which is pretty significant. So just to round us out here, we know that winter salt has negative impacts on our environment, drinking water, infrastructure, and it's costly and takes a lot of time to maintain and repair and reduce those impacts in the long term. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Renee now to talk about what we can do as residents to reduce those impacts, make a difference at the daily level. And again, we saw that many of you apply winter salt, so even just taking the correct action when you're applying can make a difference. So with that, Renee, I'm going to pass.
Great, thank you. So one response we normally get when we start talking about winter salt is, what about safety? And 100% safety, public safety is first and foremost when we talk about winter salt. However, there are ways that we can still be safe and be winter salt smart and reduce the amount of salt that we're using. Next slide, please. So if you take anything from this presentation, this is what I want you to take away. These 3 easy steps. So the first thing you do is shovel. Remove the snow first before any salt goes down on the ground. Then the next step is to salt lightly, if and only if it actually needs salt. And then the third step is sweep it up. So when things dry out and there is no longer moisture on the ground, you can go sweep it up and use it for the next store. So I'm then going to cover a few tips to be really winter salt smart and help save our waterways from oversalting. What you're looking at is the sidewalk, a well done sidewalk on the left, and then an overdone sidewalk on the right. You need about 3 inches of space in between each salt granule. It's just as safe, if not safer. I don't know about you, but I have definitely almost eaten it on those big piles of salt, like you're seeing it on the right, because it comes like a ice skating rink. It gets really slippery. So you really want that 3 inches of space between the granules, and that will help melt the ice. Next slide, please. And then the next tip is to salt in the right places. Like I said, always shovel first. Never put salt onto snow to melt the snow. And then don't put salt down where it's not needed. If there's no ice, if there's nothing to melt, then there's no need to put salt. On the top right, you'll see a good spot, a good place for salt in the areas that you know become icy really easily or do that thaw, freeze cycle. That's a good place to apply salt. And then lastly, this might be controversial. This is my personal opinion, but I prefer salt on my margaritas as well. Next slide, please. Another thing you can do is just let the sun do its job. The sun is not great for snowmen. There is a reason. It melts them. So if you know the sun's going to come out or the temperatures are going to rise, you give it an hour or so, see if that icy area melts, and then you don't have to do anything. It's like the best answer, in my opinion. Next slide, please. Okay, so then if you have an area that is icy and you need some traction, like areas where people walk on the snow before you can get out and shovel it, the picture you're looking at is the sidewalk in front of my house. That's exactly what happened here. It was a little slippery. I wanted some traction, so I put down some birdseed. And it was a great way to create traction, and then you get a little bird watching while you're snowed in. It's an excellent option, and it doesn't hurt our waterways. And, oh, sorry, go back real fast. Um, so the other question I get right now is, what are some other materials? What are the materials that we can put down, the salt that we can put down that's like safe for waterways? Unfortunately, there is no de-icing salt that is safe. They all have their pros and cons. We like to say the best salt is the salt that stays in the bag or gets put back in the bag, either way. So now we can go to the next slide. Thank you. Another great option in areas, again, that you know get a lot of snow, get really icy, is put down a tarp before a snowstorm. Put it down. Once the snowstorm's over, remove it. Not only do you not then get slippery spots, you don't bring the salt into your kitchen or into your house or the snow into your house. So that's a great option. Next slide. And like I mentioned earlier, sweep it up after. When things are dry, after the snowstorm, you can sweep it up and save it for the next storm. This is great, especially in this area where we get a lot of warm temperatures mixed with the really cold temperatures. So sometimes if you put down salt for snow, then temperatures rise and it rains, and that rain just takes that salt right into the waterway. So instead of waiting for the rain, you can go out and sweep it up. Next slide, please. These are just some helpful tools for snow removal. These aren't the only tools, but these are some options. The sidewalk ice scraper that Rebecca mentioned earlier, that's going to be also raffled off at the end of the webinar, so please stay tuned. I didn't know these existed until recently, so I'm really excited to use this when it gets icy. Apparently that might be this weekend. Another great tool is a really good snow shovel. I hope everybody has somebody in their life the way that this man is looking at this snow shovel. This is the shovel that won some award for 2025 Best Snow Shovel or something. I just randomly picked it. We are not sponsoring it. Another option, like in between a shovel, a good shovel and a snowblower, is this electric snow shovel. It's the green one in the middle. You just kind of walk along and it works kind of like a snowblower, but it's much less of a commitment. And they're electric, and they make one for every brand. So if you're House Ryobi, they probably make one, House Makita, whatever your tool of choice is. And then also, if you want to be the favorite neighbor in the neighborhood, you can invest in a snowblower. It's a great way to remove snow. Next slide, please. Bringing us back to the beginning, these three easy steps. Shovel first, remove the snow first, then salt lightly only if it's needed, and then after the storm, sweep it up. Next slide. And then here's also where we need your help on this. I love that there are a bunch of new names in this webinar because sometimes we feel like we're preaching to the choir. So maybe we're reaching some new ears. We could really use your help to share this information on social media, talk with your neighbors, family, friends. That website on the bottom, potomacriver.org/salt, that has some website or some social media graphics you can use to share on your Facebook or Instagram. And it also has a flyer that you can share with businesses to let them know your expectations. If there's a business that is over salting, you can bring in the flyer and say, hey, we know you want to protect our waterways. Here's a great way to do it. And then if you really, really want to get involved, you can join the Isaac Walton League Salt Watch program to monitor your local streams to see how they are being impacted by winter salts. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Rebecca.
All right, before we take some time for questions, I just want to reiterate this is meant to act as kind of a little snapshot of information to act as a preface for the actual Winter Salt Week and just putting the information for the primary events that they will be hosting next week. So if you're interested in learning more about winter salt impacts, particularly within our region, I would highly encourage you to tune into the live stream on Monday, where Virginia Tech will be discussing those causes, consequences, and trends for water bodies in our region, but also talking more about advocacy, Salt Monitoring 101, if that caught your attention from Renee's last slide as well, on Friday the 30th. So there's a little bit of something for everybody. And again, all of that information can be found on wintersaltweek.org. I also want to put in a plug for Isaac Walton League of America. They will also be hosting a Winter Salt Week open house on Saturday, January 31st. Both Renee and I will be there. So if there was a question or a topic that we didn't get to cover or a question we didn't get to answer this afternoon, come chat with us in person. They'll have presenters. They will also have the opportunity to go out and actually test a local stream. So if the Salt Watch again caught your eye, if there's some interest in your community, this would be a great opportunity to bring a neighbor, bring a friend, see if it's something you want to get involved in. And with that, I am going to pass it back over to Renee, and she is going to announce our two raffle winners.
Yay. Um, I'm excited to announce that Catherine Puma and Portia Pisagon, I don't know how, I'm sorry, did not pronounce your name right. You both have won a 32-inch DeWalt carbon steel blade ice scraper. So please email me with your address and I will get that off to you. Thank you.
Awesome. And so with that, I do see some activity in the chat. Looks like we have about 5 minutes for questions. And again, if we aren't able to get to your question or if there is a topic that you want more information on, Renee and I's email is right there. And both of our websites also contain further information about the topics that we discussed today. So with that, Renee, I'm going to let you turn it over to the chat and see if there's any questions. And I'm going to keep up this page in case anybody needs to jot down our information.
Sounds good. So our first question is, what is the limit for salt in drinking water?
That's a great question. So technically, there isn't a defined threshold for when we can concisely say this is when it's actually salty. This is where we need to cut off. There's been some really interesting research by Virginia Tech, who's presenting next Monday at the Occoquan lab. And so they have done a lot of work around what that threshold is, what it should be. But it's something that we're still trying to figure out ourselves. So, great question.
What about beet juice? Is it viable? Side effects? Effective?
Beet juice is an alternative that we hear about a lot. And Renee, I don't know if you've heard other information, but I've heard it can work. However, beet juice has its own impacts on water bodies. So as Renee mentioned, the challenge is that there really is no great alternative other than some things like birdseed, other environmentally friendly materials. However, again, beet juice, it can also stain the roads, stain the sidewalks, and again, yeah, it has some other impacts because of its, I think, high fruit or not high fruit, high glucose amount. So it also causes some negative side effects.
Which again then just goes into the waterways once it rains, right?
Yeah,
So on that same note, what is wrong with sand for traction?
it's another good question. So sand can be helpful if you make sure to sweep it up immediately. However, sand that gets into our local creeks and streams can cause it to become turbid or cloudy. And that also impacts things like freshwater fish, plants. It reduces habitat viability when it becomes too cloudy and there's too much sediment. But a great question. And again, in smaller spaces, it can be really beneficial if you do remember to sweep it up shortly after the storm.
Yep. Again, sweep it up. That's the key. And we had another question. How, they seem very frustrated. How does one lightly spread the stuff at the 1 grain to 3 inches? Which is it's a great question, Kurt. Thank you.
You want to take that one since you
No,
talked
go
about it?
ahead.
So I think there's no perfect answer to that. I think what does work well is having the one mug or one cup's worth. If you're doing it very lightly, typically, it's the best option. But again, I don't nobody's out there being like, oh, it's not a 3 inch spread, but in that general direction is always helpful.
Do pet-friendly ice melts contain salt? Another great question.
Oh, that's a great question, and I don't have a perfect answer to it. I think some of the alternatives are better, but most of the types of actual salt that we see is probably still impacting it. But things like birdseed, sand are a little bit better.
And there's no label requirements for winter salt. So it being labeled pet friendly really means nothing on an industry level.
And same with
So that's
environmentally
something.
friendly.
Yes. Yep, exactly. What's being done legislation wise for limiting liability if we're using less salt in lots?
Good question. And that is somewhere where, if you have further questions about this, I would reach out to Isaac Walton League of America because they do a fair amount of advocacy work. So there hasn't been any legislation put out, at least to my knowledge, in this session on the Virginia side in terms of liability. The one bill that we have seen come out for Virginia will be, or introduced, will be a study on Virginia Department of Transportation's salt use and alternatives to salt as well. So we haven't really seen anything on the liability side, but it is something that we are seeing with our northern state neighbors and ways that they've been attempting to address it. I don't know if you've seen anything on the Maryland side, though, Renee. Yeah.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so Sergio said, can you repeat the information about bird seeds?
Um,
Go ahead.
so yeah. So birdseed is a great alternative. Again, I think it's good for the environment. It makes birds happy. Um, It can be a little costly depending on the product that you choose, but Renee, I don't know if there is anything else that you wanted to add to that.
The best part about that is it's really not needed to sweep up. So if you can't get out, you don't want to get out, you don't need to sweep it up. The birds will eat the seed and then the seed will disintegrate naturally as it normally would, the seed husk, if there's a seed husk.
I see
Um,
it is 1:30,
I,
but we can stick around for another minute or two if there are further questions. But if anybody needs to hop off, thank you so much for attending today. And these slides will be posted, I assume, on both Renee and I's website. And yeah, we appreciate your time and hope you took away some actions for yourself this coming winter and maybe even for the storm this coming weekend.
and could we send out the video and the slides also to
Yes.
the people that registered? Okay. So yeah, if you're here, you will also get a copy of the slides and the video.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.